Welcome to Matt Riley Bakes. Today's recipe is this, the simple white loaf. It's one of the first things I tried to bake and one of the things that I found hardest to master. This is a really simple recipe. It's the best thing since sliced bread. So to start with, I've got my strong white bread flour in a bowl. To that I'm going to add my 7 grams of yeast and my salt. You want to keep the salt and the yeast apart because if the salt goes on the yeast it can stop it working. Next up, you want to make a well in the centre of the flour. And you want to pour half your water and olive oil mix in the middle of that. And then start combining them all. When you're happy that's combined, slowly add the rest of your water and keep mixing. When everything's combined, it's time to get your hands involved. I always knead it in here for a little bit just to make sure that all the flour is off the side of the bowl. Now it's time to turn it out to a lightly floured surface. You don't want to put too much flour down, just enough to stop it sticking. I'm going to be kneading this by hand. It's probably going to take about 10 minutes or even more. If you've got a stand mixer with a dough hook, it'll probably take about 5 minutes. So just pushing the dough away from you, pulling it back, stretching the other direction. So what you're doing here is you're developing your gluten. So what you're aiming for is a really smooth dough, and that when you stretch it out, you can see light through it without it tearing. Then it's into a lightly oiled bowl covered with cling film until it's doubled in size, or for 2 hours, whichever comes first, which gives me just about enough time to try and put this little fella to sleep.
No.
Well, that didn't work, but this has. Next up, take your dough out your bowl and then knock it back, which is where you knock any air out the dough so there's no big holes in your bread. Now you want to shape your dough so it's ready to go into the tin. If you pull it under like that, you're going to get a seam underneath, not on the top. So leave that to prove for a second time, covered with a tea towel for about half hour. A good way to see if your loaf has had a decent second prove is to give it a prod. What you're looking for is for it to spring back slowly. Perfect. Lastly, you want to sprinkle some flour on top of the loaf and then give it a slash. So I've got my oven on at 220 fan. I've got a tray of water in the bottom which will give the loaf a lovely crust. That's going in for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to turn the oven down to 190 for another 30 minutes. The way to test if your bread is done is to give it a tap on the bottom, and it should sound hollow, just like that. So there we go, my tips for making the perfect white loaf. Hope you enjoy making it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Matt Riley Bakes.